We're back, we're live with Life in the Law here on a given Wednesday. And this is a kind of special show because we're celebrating the life and legacy of Jon Van Dyke. You can see his picture on the screen. Jon was a fixture at the UH Law School for, as long as it existed. He was involved in the Constitutional Convention of 1978 and played a role in the development of our state and culture ever since that time. Sadly, he died in 2011 while in Australia on a speaking tour, as I remember. And we have a friend of his and a student of his and a person who also studied in the same area of international law and the law of the sea. We have Professor Seokwoo Lee, who's a professor at Inha University Law School in Korea, who's visiting with his wife, who has been our guest a few weeks ago, Yoon Lee, and who is sitting here. I see her, I know she's there, okay? And today we're gonna talk about the life and legacy of your friend, your teacher, your colleague, Jon Van Dyke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. So can we talk about Jon and how you met him and what kind of relationship you had with him, sort of to qualify you as someone who can discuss this?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm working at the Inha University in Seoul, in Korea, and Inha is interesting, composed of the two words. The In is Incheon, the city of Korea where the university is located, and the Ha is Hawaii. Very interestingly, I think that many colleagues know about the history of my university, but Inha University was built by the Korean immigrant to Hawaii. And after Korean War, the Korean immigrant to Hawaii believed that the science technology is very much important, so they collect money to donate money to build the university. So by that, the strong background of my university and University of Hawaii, I have quite a strong link to work with many colleagues of the University of Hawaii Law School. And beyond that, since I'm working on the territorial boundary issues and the human rights issues and the law of the sea issues, which the area the Professor Van Dyke is very much working on before. So we have many contact. I have many contact with him. So I met him in person is almost 11 years ago, I think 2005, when he visited Korea. I work as the moderator, one of his presentation. And then we built sort of like a strong relations, so sometimes as a co-worker, co-author, co-editor, and also the commentator and so on. And my link with him is getting deeper and deeper because I'm a person to organize the conference where Professor Van Dyke, the sudden death in 2011 down under in Australia. And I spent the last minute with him, so which makes me more, feel that sort of the obligation or responsibility to move on his legacy of his contribution for this area.
Well, some questions for you. It strikes me that in recent years, say in the period between, say, 1978, using that year, and now there has been an extraordinary increase in the connections, academically and otherwise, between the U.S. and Korea, and specifically between Hawaii and Korea. Would you comment on that?
All right. In fact, weeks ago, I held an organized conference with the East-West Center, or also the law school. The terms, the title as a reconciliation in Asia Pacific. The main reason I hold the conference is that one of his, the Professor Van Dyke paper is a reconciliation in Asia Pacific, and he compared with what happened in Asia with the U.S. relations with the Kingdom of Hawaii, in particular overthrown of the 1890s.
Way back when, yeah.
Yeah. So his comparison with the pictures, what happened in this, state in Hawaii, and they look at what happened in Asia, give us some idea how we compare, how we research together. And that idea to bring us the many academics over the world and to talk about the topics of reconciliation. And the way back to the 1948, it's just a Korean War is completed. And the time that there's nothing in Korea, and we can see that there is enormous the changes in terms of the economic development in Korea. But that does not necessarily mean that everything is we can cure or we can hide behind us. So there's a couple of the issues still maintained until today, and how we deal with those issues we cannot overcome to looking at the other experience, the other parts of the world. In a sense that the Professor Van Dyke work and other scholarship still has a very strong the meaning to us. That's why many colleagues still remember him, in particular after his uncertainty passing away.
Well, let's talk about the nature of your scholastic relationship with him. Now, you are an expert on international law, the law of the sea, international human rights law. I think those were his areas also. Before you started teaching at Inha University, you took a PhD from Oxford and multiple LLMs. That's a Master of Laws degree from NYU, Minnesota, and Korea University, which I assume is in Seoul.
Right.
And so I'm interested in knowing, academically, exactly what kind of experience you had in meeting him, what you did together, why he appealed to you as an academic colleague, and why you appealed to him.
I see. He's the when I the first time to meet him in person. Of course, before that, as a graduate student, when I working on the PhD and the master thesis, and I know that he's many the works. But when I have a chance to moderate his own paper, that is exactly what I research in my PhD. And I have a little bit different understanding with him. So my comments against him is a little bit harsh, I believe, at the time, because the American view of what happened in Asia Pacific is a lot of gloss over the historical context among the countries have. Because as you know, Korea was colonized over Japan is over 35 years, and still after 70 years, the people in Korea has a very strong sense of that the humanities or the causes from that sad story. But without curing of those historical contexts, it is very much difficult to move on or touch upon other issues. And then when the topic of Professor Van Dyke is, which I work as moderator, is about territorial disposition of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. It's the San Francisco Peace Treaty of the 1951. And here, looking at a little bit, I say that the practical way, highly American way, make it more easier to understand what is done over there. And my view about his understanding is, without having historical context of what has done at the time, it is quite difficult to, fully understand what is the outcome of that arrangement. So we have a little bit, agree to disagree, and they engage us on some discussions.
Fair enough.
Right. Yeah. And then we realized that we can, cooperate, or we can co-work to produce the very solid outcome on certain topics. And then he became my one of the best mentor and the best colleagues in many issues, because I got lessons, his huge scholarship, because at the time I just beginning of my academic career. So I may say that he bring me a sort of like an international standard to how I deal with various issues. So when I am working with the various issues, I not always I agree with him, but his view on certain issues, which I do not know before, is immensely very much helpful for me to move on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What year did you meet him?
When?
When?
It's a person is 205 in Seoul. 205 in Seoul, so
okay.
which means that almost 10 years ago. Yeah.
I want to deliver to people the flavor of what it's like to be in an international collaboration the way you had with Jon. So what is it, how important is it, how meaningful, how prestigious is it for you to moderate his paper?
The time, I'm a very early stage of the academics, and he's already giant in the field. And in highly Korean standard, where the seniority is very much important, usually moderator is senior than the speaker, and highly opposite at the time. And my understanding and the comments on his paper is also a little bit very critical and very harsh from certain point of view. But one thing I very much impressed his gesture or his behavior is that he's very much welcoming that the critics, and he incorporated his paper and he published it in one of the prestigious journals. And when I read his final manuscript, which published it in
this is all in English.
Yes,
everything we're talking about was in English.
Right,
okay.
and that is quite impressed to me that he incorporated my idea or my critics in his paper to publish as a highly the decent way, which I think the way he approached or the way he incorporated with the junior scholar is, I think, is more than amazing. He's very impressive, right?
Well, he was there doing this, at a time when, it wasn't being done very much. Mm-hmm. He was there studying international law and doing academic things about international law all over Asia Pacific, right, at a time when it hadn't really gelled so much, the connection between Hawaii and the US and Asia Pacific on matters of international law, on matters of the law of the sea, mm-hmm, and for that matter, human rights. So he was in an area which was moving ahead. He was pushing the envelope. This must have attracted you academically, intellectually, that here was a guy who had already been doing it, you had decided to do it, so you find someone who could be a good mentor for you in just the right areas.
Right.
So how, what do you say to him? Professor Van Dyke, I'd like to spend some time with you. How does that work? How do you bond up, in a scholastic relationship like that?
So in Korea, for example, if I classified my special area, I may say that just a public international, which cover the law of the sea and the human rights and other issues like a treaty and other important basic issues of the public international law. And that is, I think, quite interestingly, quite overlap with what the Professor Van Dyke's area. And in the things, the salient issues in Asia Pacific, I think that somebody who only working on the law of the sea sometimes cannot approach the issue properly, because the many issues sort of like interconnect each other and overlap each other. So you should understand the dynamics of the issues. They get involve each other. So you have to understand what is the historical sense of the issues happen. You have to understand the law of the sea and the human rights and other environmental issues. And for example, the Professor Van Dyke works of the, I mentioned the territorial boundary issues, but we also working the other various issues in that region. For example, military sexual slavery issues or the forced labor issues derived from the colonial era. So all those issues, overlap each other. So we are started to how we deal with the issues. And luckily, I have some relations with some of the agencies or the sponsors in Korea. So we built a couple of the international conference together, and in annual basis. And in a sense, that the biggest the outcome I involved because of him is that he introduced me to the so-called the Law of the Sea Institute, which is sort of the 60 years. And right now that institute is located in UC Berkeley in California. And that is sort of the giant group who working on Law of the Sea. They get together annual basis and they produce the very important outcome. And you may know that the once Law of the Sea Institute located the University of Hawaii, that is a very powerful period of that, on that issues. And the Professor Van Dyke introduced me to that group, and that is became a very core member of the community, and that they make the contribution until today. And that that is one example how he asked me to do and how I can contribute. And then not only that issues, we have the various occasions meet and work together. And sometimes I make jokes that, as you know, these days South China issues or other maritime issue conflicts are more prevalent than before. So sometimes I met him around the world.
In various places.
Yeah, various places.
Yeah.
It's like I think in the year 2010 I met him. I think 6 times per year. There's the various areas of the world. I said to him that this year I met you more than my parents, right? Yeah. So sort of he's one of my close friend and a close mentor, and the most important thing is that whenever we had a chance to meet, we can develop some idea together to produce as a outcome as a publication. So which is a very important meaning.
I want to talk to you about those things.
Right.
But before we go to our break, I just want to mention a sort of midterm conclusion I get out of what you're saying. And that is, in this period, say, from the time that Jon Van Dyke started to do international conferences and speaking and papers, academic activities overseas, till now, the whole field, am I right, has been completely dynamic. That people weren't thinking, lawyers weren't thinking. There weren't that many international lawyers. There wasn't that much international law per se. Back, say, in the 70s, say, my benchmark year, 1978 again, which is around the time he joined the William S. Richardson School of Law. Mm-hmm. And in that period, it's all become much more international, much more collaboration, much more travel, much more integration on a Pacific level and a global level. And you were there. You could see this happen. You could see the dynamic in the law, and for that matter, in Jon Van Dyke.
That's true. Yeah.
So we'll take a short break and come back.
Okay,
we'll go to some of the issues you referred to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's Professor Seokwoo Lee, professor at Inha University Law School, a friend of Jon Van Dyke, and today our show is about the life and legacy of Jon Van Dyke.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen, host of Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii. Come join us every Friday at 2 p.m. when I interview interesting scientists about what they do, why they do it, and why we should all care about it. It's a lot of fun to see. We hear, and you can learn interesting stuff. You'll hear all kinds of fascinating science, and we know you'll have a great time. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're back. We're live, and this is Jon Van Dyke. He died in 2011. He was a great law professor and legal scholar, and a credit to his life and times at the William S. Richardson School of Law. He was there from essentially the inception of that school until he died in 2011. We're talking today about his life and legacy with somebody who could talk about that, who saw Jon Van Dyke through the eyes of a colleague and a friend, and that is Professor Seokwoo Lee, a professor at Inha University Law School. And we spoke of various things that you collaborated with Jon Van Dyke on, and I want to drill down about them. Because as I have concluded, in that period from, say, 1978 till now, law of the sea has been dynamic. When I went to law school, they would say, there really is no international law. Yeah. There really is no law, because nobody has really agreed about what it is, and there's no firm precedent you can count on. But that has changed in my lifetime, and certainly in yours, and certainly in Jon Van Dyke's. And you guys, and Jon especially, contributed to those changes. So what kinds of issues did you work on together? What kinds of papers, what kinds of lectures and conferences did you attend and contribute to in order to advance the law of the sea, international law and generally, and for that matter, humanitarian human rights law?
Mm-hmm. The academic background, I think they very clearly clarified. If you have a chance to look at the obituary of the New York Times after he passed away, the New York Times obituary identify, of course, although you can look after his research, the products through the internet, but they identified the various issues. He was recognized one of the a very the famous constitutional lawyer, but he is identified the person who fight the issues indigenous people's rights in Hawaii, native Hawaiian people, and also the various environmental issues like nuclear issues and also the marine environmental issues. And also he's recognized.
How do you have enough all the time necessary to cover all those issues?
Right.
It's the whole array, the whole enchilada.
Right,
You know?
it's amazing. His area of research is too broad and too diverse. But I had a chance to come to his memorial service. I had also invited to talk briefly. At the time, I described him as a very short term is that he's a really voice for the voiceless. So he working always for the weakness and that somebody who do not have a voice and cannot have a voice. So that if you look at his paper and his academic work, he working for the human rights victims at the Marcos regime of the Philippines, and he also working the native Hawaiian people, and he also working for the somebody who suffer from the climate change or sea level rise, in particular Asia Pacific region. And he also working for the comfort woman and the military sexual slavery and also the forced labor issues in Korea, which suffer from the Japan's colonization. And other issues I am very much working with deeply. We produced the paper together is one of the island issues between Korea and Japan. The Korean people called it the Dokdo, the Japanese called it the Takeshima. And he viewed that island issues from the very unique view and very practical view, and combining with that island issues with other colonial context to say that the Korean people was colonized Japan so long time, was suffered, and that Japan have to approach that issue from the reconciliation, and he approached the issue from the based on the what he experienced in Hawaii.
Sure.
Yeah, vis-a-vis
Good
the
connection,
what is it?
yeah.
Or what vis-a-vis happened, the centers, the government against the local government here. So he looked at from the experience to approach that what happened in Asia Pacific, and also in particular the bilateral relations between the Korea and Japan. And his view is the first time is quite difficult to digest because a little bit simplified what happened between them. But after that, I realized that his view is highly practical, and in particular, the situation in Asia Pacific, in particular, bilateral relations, Korea and Japan is getting worse and worse. So his idea or his very practical approach can be still, I think, they adopted at the current stages, right? Yeah.
You know what strikes me also, just from our discussion, is that the things you're talking about, all these areas, international law, the law of the sea, human rights, environmental law, so many other things. I suppose boundary law, and how countries handle boundary issues between them. It's not so much law as it is policy, isn't it? Because inherent in all of this, I mean, some of these things are definitely driven by ethical considerations, moral, ethical considerations. Okay, human rights, for example. But some of them are economic, some of them are diplomatic,
Right.
some of them are totally historical, where you look back not necessarily for a precedent, but an array of historical facts that points you this way or that way. And so this whole area of law that he adopted, that you've adopted, is not so much specific law like the law of a contract,
Right.
or like interpreting a statute that governs this controversy. It's a matter of making a better world by applying the right policy, isn't it?
Yeah. So we are very much concerned when we're working together is that we call that the positive view of the interpretation application of the law. Is highly, I think, the Western, the European concept. And as I mentioned to you that that is not quite to go with a so-called the third world, or the countries where suffered from the colonization has a same understanding or same line to that approach. And what Professor Van Dyke and I working together is that we try to really build some of the new idea or new approach, which I say that the historical context approach or historical criticism approach. If you look at some of the dissenting opinion, is a very important, the International Court of Justice cases. The term is quite recently it's come up as described as a historical the criticism approach, which is very much important for me and Professor Van Dyke. And we adopted that idea, and we approached the many issues. So tried to build that the Western dominated or the European dominated the understanding of international law may not good for all the cases we are having in these days. And so we have to approach that the cases we have a very specific the context based on the approach and interpretation, we more the suitable to that. So that is, I think, the basic the approach or the basic outcome of the what I working with the Professor Van Dyke. And but as he's a little bit, left us a little bit earlier than what he expects.
That was tragic.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that is what I call the legacy. As one of his mentee or as one of his academic friends, that is what I have to do, and that I really want to do.
Yes, carry on his work.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But while you were working together, it also strikes me that you didn't agree on everything, that you represented, intellectual backgrounds from different places, different cultures, and yet you got together, and yet you shared. And I imagine there was a give and take. In other words, as you said, it was, and he appreciated that it was good not to agree on everything. It was good to exchange ideas that were a little different and to synthesize them into a greater good, a higher vision. And I imagine, I'm just guessing, but I imagine that's the way it was between you and Jon Van Dyke, that he would give you an idea and you would say, well, have you thought of this? And then he would say, yes, but have you thought of this? And then together you rise.
Right, that's true. And he, the one thing, when I'm working with him, the one thing, as I mentioned earlier, how he approached the junior colleagues and how he incorporates the remarks from the junior colleagues in his own work, which is very much the impress to me. And the other interesting thing is that when I'm working with him is, if the two academics working together, I'm not saying, I cannot say that this is a general understanding in Korea, but usually senior's name go first, usually.
Is that based on age?
Yeah, it's a seniority is very much important in Korea. So usually senior go first, then the junior follow, regardless of who contributes more. But when I'm working with him, and that published as an article, one of the very prestigious journal, and that is about the again the history interpretation, and as a practical a customary matter, I put his name the first, but I noticed that at the end of he sent to the journal, he put my name first. So and he said that I contribute more, so it is the basically corrected things that my name go first. It's maybe a very small thing, but
not so,
right.
yeah.
A very small thing, I believe, but it is the matter of the principle he wants to pursue, and that is a sort of I can give my full credit or to trust about him.
After this break,
Yeah.
Professor, I want to get to exactly what kind of personal fellow he was,
Right.
what kind of personal relationship you had, and how that all complements the intellectual relationship. That's Professor Seokwoo Lee of Inha University Law School in Korea. We're talking about a legacy, Jon Van Dyke, his life and legacy. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on Think Tech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Hi, I'm your host on Think Tech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, Think Tech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, we're back, we're live, and that is Jon Van Dyke, law professor and legal scholar at the William S. Richardson School of Law. Today we're talking with his friend and his colleague, Professor Seokwoo Lee of Inha University Law School in Korea. And we're talking about his death and his legacy. So you were there at the same conference in Australia, 2011, when John died in his sleep, as I remember from the newspaper account. What was that conference about? And were you working on it together at that time, Professor?
That is the Law of the Institutes Conference. We hold the annual conference, and at the time the University of Wollongong near Sydney hosted a conference. And he went there as on behalf of the Law of the Institutes. And that conference is I'm one of the organizer. And the first day is I think in November 2027 we met the first at the breakfast, the hotel.
Just a few days more than 2 years ago. Huh?
Right, and so it seems to
Make
me
that 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah, right. And he was a little bit tired because before he came to the Australia, he has some family issues. He had to go to Florida to see the things happen to his father and the family. And he came here a little bit tired, and we had a breakfast together, and also lunch together, and the dinner together. And over the lunch, we're talking about our gathering for Hawaii and other various areas of the world. And one issue is I talked with him is that since I get many things from him, I want to celebrate his 70th birthday, the workshop here, to touch upon the various issues of his academic accomplishments. And it's a very pleasant day. It's very, in November in Sydney, in Australia, it's very
Sure.
nice.
Springtime.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. It's a very pleasant lunch. And the dinner time, also, we had a cup of wine at the dinner table, and he told me that a little bit tired, he want to, go to bed. I want to see me tomorrow. And when in a day he had to show is 29th. Unfortunately, he do not show. It's a highly unexpected things during my acquaintance with him. And so people is a little bit, they're curious about his absence, but the venue is not a hotel and at the university. And so we move on as scheduled, and then we got the notice that something happened over the night. That is November 29th. And that is, very much, shock to everybody who involved the meeting and also has relations with him. So after meeting that, the organizing committee members decided to dedicate the conference to the friendship memory to the Professor Van Dyke, and also that the book come out from the proceedings of the conference was dedicated to him. So after that, 2011, a couple of books or the couple of the workshops also dedicated to him. And after that, as you know, his wife, his spouse, Sherry Broder, built the so-called the Jon Van Dyke Institute
Yes.
International Justice. So I'm here, quite occasionally to work with the conference because. The conference is mainly funded by one of the Korean the institute, who also involved that November conference in Australia. And they thought that how important to maintain his legacy or his accomplishments. So in a Korean sponsor, for me, it's also very much they appreciate because they not forget how the Professor Van Dyke, they working for Korea and the many issues. Right. Yeah.
Gee, it sounds like his connection with Korea was as close as any other country. his connection with you was as close as any other colleague. You must have been shocked and struck by his premature early death, surprise death, back in 2011. What was your reaction? How did you feel about it?
It's that is actually the unthinkable. When you have the conference, a person who came, joined with us, that passed away. That is, there's something should not be happen. Things happen, right? And she should be the carry on, and so conference is completed, and but including myself is everybody talking about how we deal with this. Then the good things is that the senior peoples and the older people is talking about we have to do something after that, and that is the it's a good outcome for his accomplishment.
I suppose so, because now it is memorialized.
Right.
And now it will live on.
Right.
But talk about that, his legacy, from your point of view, and you are as close as anyone to, what that legacy might be, intellectually, professionally. What is his legacy to the lawyers who were involved in these conferences, to the law, and for that matter, to the world?
Mm. I think I always think about the what actually he left us. What is the legacy? Go beyond the accomplishments of his academic work or his practice. But as I mentioned to you, that among the international lawyers of the world at this moment, or the international lawyers in his generation, I think he may be the only one I can notice that the working for the voice race again. He always working for that the people who suffered and the people who don't have power, or even he working for the murmurs or the orangutans or the animals or the whole thing. So it is in comparison with the current activities of the various international lawyers in these days, I think it's a very remarkable thing. It's quite difficult to find that. Even I know that what is the general understanding of a concept of the lawyers here, but it's the same thing in international law area too. But he always working as those fields as a pro bono basis, and always try to give that some impression that there is a justice to be completed, and that there is a way we completed those justices. And he always emphasized that the core work, and he always emphasized that how the individuals connect each other, how he behave. So in many sense, he left the various meanings of the legacy, which I believe that junior colleagues or his colleagues have to complete it, right? Yeah.
Well, you remember him, of course, exquisitely, but what about the other part of the legal community in Seoul and Korea? Do they remember him also? Is he talked about these days?
Yeah, of course. People, not every the Korean scholars can be at the memorial service, but they know that I will be here. I will be there at the time. So they asked me to convey their, sincere, the appreciations of what Professor Van Dyke did for Korean government or Korean peoples or Korean colleagues. And he made a trip more than I think the 45 times to Korea. And he has, not only myself, he has a various good contact with the various Korean scholars. And he will be remembered, I think, one of the top international lawyers who has influence working for the Korea.
Now, I get from what you say that if we had to find a few words to state what his lasting contribution would be to this area of law, I think what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is the notion of justice. Inherent is fairness, but justice applies to all the areas he was working on, and he was seeking justice. And that's a great way to develop an area of the law that needs precedent, that needs more thought, more concern, more writing, more discussion, to apply justice. Am I right about this?
I think so. I think so. Since you correctly understand that, I think I did today's interview very well.
I think so.
Yeah, I think.
Well, one more
Right.
question, Professor, and that is, what kind of impression did he leave on you? You carry with him, with you part of him. You, the day he died, you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with
Right,
him.
right.
You spent a lot of time with him, and you come from different worlds, different cultures, different languages, different orientations in all ways, and yet, clearly, you were friends, and you spent a lot of time together. You are friends for history. So what impression did he leave on you?
It's quite difficult things to say, but I don't know in America that sometimes the father and dad things. Father and dad is sometimes not always good. I'm more comfortable with spend time with Prof. Van Dyke than my father. But the thing is that the various area, sometimes he correct me if I behave a little bit, in decent way from his perspective. I like
That's
his,
perfect.
Right. So he is great mentor. I say. I say that in Korean standard, friends is a sort of the similar generation. So I do not use the term. But he's a great colleague and a great mentor. I do not take his class as a student, but I'm very much miss him because I don't think I can find anyone to act him to me. So my biggest the job I have to do is that to carry on his legacy to me and to the community.
Yeah. In you he lives.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor. It's been
Pleasure.
wonderful to talk to
Right.
you. We're going to show Jon Van Dyke one more time on the screen. This has been a discussion of his life and legacy. He was a giant at William S. Richardson School of Law from the time of its inception, and he had a tremendous influence on the areas of law he covered and on the people he met and the countries he dealt with. Thank you so much, Professor.